We've built models with BigQuery and we've built models with Vertex AI, and both of those were pretty simple and straightforward ways to build models. We didn't really have to write a lot of code. We just had to build some SQL queries or label some data. But we're going to get into using notebooks because they're another way that we can produce models. So notebooks are pretty popular because they allow you to combine code that is executable as well as documentation in a really easy to share artifact. So probably the most common environment for this is JupyterLab, and JupyterLab is an application you can install and then it just works right through your browser. So JupyterLab files, they're IPy notebooks, so IPYNB extensions, and they haven't, you can put data in them, you can visualize that data, you can add documentation through Markdown, you can write Python code, you can visualize, you can add, you can execute your code, and they also typically allow for console access. JupyterLab has a text editor, so there's a lot of things that you can do right in this environment without having to do a lot of extra setup. And it also is nice because you can put it on a server somewhere where there are a lot of resources and then access it through a lower powered machine. So Webbased is nice because you can set up particular virtual machines, or you can set up a specific configuration. You can set it up easily, you can tear it down easily. This is much easier than just doing everything at the command line or copying and pasting commands. So there are a lot of different ways to build some particular environment how-to tutorial that allow you to copy and paste or execute commands directly. But JupyterLab files, these notebook files, give the ability to very easily execute and see your results right in line. So you add code, data, visualization, documentation all together. It's a really nice system. And if you have a virtual machine somewhere and you want to start it up and you want to access it remotely using your browser and work with your notebook files, you have that capacity, that capability, and then you can shut down your VM when you're not using it. So it does allow you to have a little bit of flexibility in the way that you approach your machine learning development and documentation. So if you want to get JupyterLab on your own machines, you can just use pip. You can also use, you can use an environment manager. You can use Conda. There's a variety of ways to actually run JupyterLab. But much more common is to actually just use a hosted service for this. So there is Vertex AI notebooks, there's Amazon SageMaker, Kaggle has kernels, there's Microsoft Azure notebooks. We're going to focus mainly on Colab, but I'm going to show you around the JupyterLab interface here so that you have an understanding of how it works, and you can kind of understand where the pieces are. So JupyterLab environment looks like this. It's in your browser, so you have a big window here where you can execute things. You have some files on the left. You have a menu, and you can see here's your menu. You've got different menu options. It works kind of like desktop software in that way. So you can manage different processes or change settings there. You have a launcher where you can set up your different like execution environments or editing environments. So each one of these is going to allow you to run like a notebook for Python 3 or open a text editor or something else. You have tools that you can use, and these are going to vary. You might have different installations here that have different capabilities, and you have a file browser because all of these are just this IPyNB IPy notebook. They're files. They're just files that wrap all of this together into in one single text file. So you also have some options here. You can create new folders in your environment. You can upload files to your VM. So this kind of allows you through the browser very easily to interact with your environment as necessary. Now, the notebooks themselves, they tend to have really two major kinds of cells. You have text cells or markdown cells, and you can double click to edit them. So if you were to look at this particular file and you double clicked on one of those, you'd get this now Markdown interface. So Markdown is pretty simple. It's actually a pretty basic language for just specifying formatting. It's a little bit easier than HTML. So if you press that play button, that'll go back to your normal view, and this is, like I said, your Markdown. So very simple crash course on Markdown. 2 asterisks surrounding a word makes the word bold, or makes the sentence fragment or whatever text bold. Using an underscore on either side of a word or a phrase makes that italic. And then headings, you start with 1 octothorpe or pound sign. That makes a heading, and then smaller headings. So you have 2 pound signs or 2 octothorpes, and 3, and then 4. So you can actually have sort of like an outline of these. And you can also add links by using square brackets for the text you want to display, and then parentheses for the URL you want to link to. So this allows you to very quickly and easily, if you're trying to just write a few paragraphs, or you're just trying to enter a description, you can do it pretty quickly without having to think about coding or changing to square brackets or or angle brackets or anything like that. You just sort of do it naturally. So it's a nice quick way to create some formatted text. You also have block quotes. So if you want to have quotes or or text that is inside, that's fine. You have lists. You can use lists with one dot and then your text, and then two dot and then your text. Though it's probably simpler to just do one dot, one dot, one dot. So if you do one dot, your text, one dot, your text, one dot, your text, Markdown will automatically make that into numbers. So it's not just 1, 1, 1. You'll say 1, 2, 3 in a normal progression. You can also use asterisks in this way. So asterisk your item, asterisk your item. That will be converted when it's visualized into a list that looks similar to like an ordered list or an unordered list in HTML. You can add code in line, so you use backticks, and that will allow you to do code formatting right in line with your text. You can also have code blocks, so 3 backticks and then a language will allow you to format in a particular language. Now in Jupyter Lab, you can actually use a lot of different languages and a lot of different Markdown formats. You can use a lot of different languages. In Colab, which we're going to take a look at, you pretty much just use Python, so you don't actually have to change the language. So you can just use 3 backticks and it'll format normally. So your code cells typically just look like straight up code. There's not really a whole lot of mystery there. So you write some code, and you can execute it directly. You can typically use Control Enter or Command Enter, depending on if you're on Mac or if you're on a Windows machine or Linux machine potentially. If you look here, your outputs display automatically. So by typing A, B, C, D, that allows us to show the outputs of those values. So the Collab environment is actually also pretty simple. You can access this at collab.research.google.com, and then you can just start working with it once you sign in with your Google account. It's a pretty straightforward instance of Jupyter Lab. It's a little bit different. You don't have quite as much control, but it's also free to use, and it's really easy to get started with. So I find Colab is a really good environment for instructional purposes. So you can see the Colab environment here. We have a menu just like in Jupyter Lab at the top. Not quite as many options, but you do have options. You have an outline of your different, as you enter headings into your text, you'll find that those show up there. You can access a terminal. You can see your code cells here. You can see your Markdown cells. So there's actually quite a bit that you can do within the Colab environment. So to get started with this, if you are familiar with Java, or even if you're not familiar with Java, but you've done a little bit of coding in another language, this link, and I'll put this in the description, also allows you to access a sequence of files that will kind of tell you how to work with Python and how to get started with Jupyter Lab. So working through these 10 or so notebook files will give you some understanding of how to work in Jupyter, a Jupyter Lab-like environment, which is Colab, as well as learn some Python syntax and how to use the language in general. So that's all we have for now. We're going to take a look at Colab. We're going to kind of work through one of these examples, and there we go. Hopefully this was helpful, and thank you for watching.